What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growing Up Gaming, your weekly podcast where we meet a new person of the internet to discuss their childhood with gaming and how it inspired their lives today. My name is Mitch Power. Again, thank you guys so much for returning each and every week to the show. Hopefully you have subscribed on iTunes or Google Play or YouTube or found us some other way. However way you're here and listening to me, I do appreciate it. Whether you're a new listener or returning listener, again, thank you guys so much for your support each and every week. This week on the show, we have our guest. His name is David White. I met this man on the Comedy Button Facebook group more than a year ago. He was actually one of the very first people to reach out to me to say that he wanted to be a guest on the show, and finally timing worked out to where I was able to get him on the show, and I had such a blast recording with him. One of the reasons I started doing the show is to get such a different perspective of not just people from where I'm from or from the United States or North America, but just all over the world, and hearing his story and how he started gaming is so different than anyone else's that I personally know. And, you know, he showed me new game consoles, new characters, new games I've never even heard of. So I hope you guys enjoy listening to his episode just as much as I enjoyed recording it. So if you guys want to be on the show just like he was, go ahead and send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter, or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. Without further ado, let's get things started with David White. Do you remember what initially got you started playing games? Was it a family member?
Vaguely.
Was it a buddy? Like a cool kiosk at a store that I don't know what stores they had in England? Like, what got you started?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually from a little country called Wales.
Okay.
Which is just sort of next door to England. It's a small little country that kind of gets forgotten when it comes to the UK, really. I think a lot of people think the UK is just England and Scotland, which is understandable. But no, I'm from a little country called Wales, and what started me gaming, I think, it's quite hard to pinpoint, but I think it was when I was about... I'm going to take a stab here and probably say about 6 or 7. I'm not 100%. And I was visiting a cousin, and he had this black computer in the corner. And it's probably the first time I saw a computer. Now, before that, I think the only time I saw a computer was in my school, in my primary school or
right.
Elementary school. You know, so. They had a machine called the BBC Micro, which I don't think it made it anywhere. I don't think that made it anywhere near to the States. These big 7-inch or gigantic plastic floppy disks, and on the played games on there. Like there's a rip-off of Defender. There was a rip-off of. There were a lot of clones on the BBC Micro. It was a rip-off of what's that game called? Of Space Panic, and that was could well have been my intro to gaming, but I'm pretty sure that it was when I visited my cousin and he had this computer in the corner and he was playing a game. Now, this computer was an Amstrad. Have you heard of Amstrad?
I personally have not, no.
No. They're a British company created by Alan Sugar and Alan Michael Sugar Trading, that's why it's called Amstrad. And this was a machine called an Amstrad CPC. I think it was a CPC 6128, I want to say, because it had the black keyboard with the red and green, some red and green buttons, and the screen was a monochrome screen. It was it was just green, not monochrome. It was just a single color.
Right.
It wasn't black and white. It was green. But he was playing this game called Oh Mummy. This was my cousin was playing this game called Oh Mummy, and it was very much a Pac-Man clone. But I almost a reverse Pac-Man clone, and I'll explain why in a moment. So he was playing that, and I think then I played it, and I was just playing it all day. So not all day, but I was just playing it constantly, and the music was ridiculous because it had that. I think the song is called "The Streets of Cairo." I think it's called, where it's that very stereotypical Egyptian pyramid tune, you could call it.
Right.
That would be going around and around and around and around, and it would drive people insane. And I guess my family wasn't all that tech savvy. They didn't really know how to turn down the monitor, so I was constantly playing this game because they had those dials on there for color and volume and that. But they didn't know that, so there I was in this corner playing this game constantly. And then it got to the time where I had to go home, and I think my mother then saw how much I loved this machine, and then she got myself one. So this would have been my first personal machine. It wasn't a console. It was a microcomputer.
Right.
And it was in the Amstrad range, called an Amstrad CPC 464 Plus. And it was a superior machine in my opinion because, well, it is. It's not my opinion. It definitely is because it was full color, better looking in my opinion. It wasn't like that weird sort of horrible matte black kind of color. It was kind of like a bright gray, I guess. So then I had my own copy of Omami. I still have it, in fact. Not the computer, sadly, just the game. But that's quite a kind of a very proud item that I have because it's like my first game that I ever played. Not necessarily owned, but my first game that I ever played. So, yeah. So I think I'm pretty sure I was introduced. That was my introduction to gaming in general, I think.
And the thing is like, and you were mentioning how like everything was a clone. Like, obviously people didn't give a shit about copyrights and infringements. No. And like, dude, no. Like, there were so many copies out there. I mean, I'm sure there was 17 Defenders that you could just name different things and Pac-Man clones, and especially just when it wasn't officially licensed and stuff, like, not just Atari, but like you were talking about, like different consoles and stuff, or computers, or that's the one thing that I will say I never really got into any of the computer stuff. Like, I personally was more just started out in the home console range and just kind of went from there. But I remember that I had a friend who played on a computer, but again, it was definitely more of a computer that happened to play games as well. You know what I mean? Like, the family picked it up for word processing, not for Doom. So, that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, this is the exact reason why I wanted people on here, because like you just mentioned things I've never heard of in my life. And that's interesting because, I mean, like I said, those are different things that you got started doing that. I got started doing something. Everybody got started doing something different. So, I mean, it's really cool that's, especially the fact that you still have it. You know what I mean? You still have the original one that you owned and everything, because that, of course, that's that piece of you that, this is kind of what led you down the rabbit hole of gaming, and that's awesome. Like, that's super cool. What was the name of that thing again?
The computer?
Yeah.
An Amstrad CPC 464 Plus. It's I actually taught myself how to program on it as well. It was my pride and joy for a long time.
I'm looking up Google images of it right now, and it reminds me of, like, similar to how maybe like a Commodore was, just like a computer that just little monitor and stuff. No, that's awesome. Yeah, like I said, I literally have never heard of that, never seen one. But again, like, that's awesome. And yeah, I know what you're talking about, by the way, with the green screen. So was it similar to how the Game Boy was, like the OG big brick Game Boy, how it was just like green and then black? Like, there was no colors. It was just like, it was a weird shade of green.
In a way, if you were to compare it to the Game Boy, it's kind of the opposite, where on the Game Boy it was kind of a dark green on a light green most of the time, wasn't it, really? But not, I know that wasn't, I know there were games that go the other way as well, but I liken it to, I think of it as the opposite, really, because it was more, jet black background and all the images and all the text
was green. Gotcha.
Yeah, bright green. Think about 1980s sci-fi movies, depictions of computers.
There you go. That makes a lot more sense.
That flickering green screened computer typing in all nonsense, and basically that.
That makes a lot more sense and everything. So,
what one are you looking at there? You're looking at the black one, is it?
Well, I'm looking at the Amstrad CPC 464 Plus, and it's like just it's just like, it looks like a normal looking keyboard. My favorite thing is, of course, on the old keyboards, how initially when you got them they were gray, and then they that plastic, same as like the NES, like fades to like a yellow, like for whatever reason. It looks like you have a smoker in the house, but you don't. Like, it just fades to that yellow over time. So yeah, I'm just looking at, again, I've seriously never heard of that before, but I can see what it is, and I can pretty much get the idea of what the games were looking like on there. And so it looks like on there they were cartridge based, right? They were just like little cartridges that put into the keyboard, like the actual machine itself.
Both cartridge and cassette, really. If you're looking at the C464 Plus model, you should see on the top right. You should see on the right the cartridge slot, but on just on the right corner, you should see it was on the right corner, I think.
Yeah, it's a cassette. It's like a full-on cassette tape, like.
Yeah. So the cartridges were, although oddly enough, I didn't really have any cartridges apart from the one that came with it. And if you're looking at some sort of promotional imagery there, you probably will see a cartridge for a game called Burning Rubber. Probably. And it was actually a really good looking game, considering. If you were to look up screenshots of it, it's very much a Top Gear like racer.
I actually am seeing it right here, Burning Rubber. Yep, it looks just like a RC Pro-Am, like the Pro-Am games. Like, it looks like something that the Power Glove would have been used for, those types of games. It's a
really good looking game considering all the other games that I was playing on that. But primarily, I think and I guess this is kind of weird because the cartridges were immediate. They loaded up straight away just like a normal cartridge would, but the cassette had to be read.
So that was your original loading back in the day, was just loading off of this cassette.
Very, very manual as well. So it wasn't a case of popping in the cassette and turning it on and away you go. It was different machines had different methods, but generally the same sort of gist. So in the case of the Amstrad, if I remember correctly, you put in the cassette, you press play, and then on the screen you type run, and then in inverted commas the name of the game, Mummy, say. Or I'm trying to think of another game, Quick Snacks or something like that, and then it will load, and it will load in blocks. And I'm not kidding you, it would take a decent sized game, or the average game, let's say, about 4 or 5 minutes to load. Let's say.
Oh wow!
It was quite absurd. How they didn't drift gradually over to the cartridges, I guess people didn't mind. I guess.
I guess they wouldn't care because, like I said, it's newer technology and they just kind of dealt with it. You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine, like, again, when something first comes out, you just kind of deal with the quirks and shit. You're just like, we got to, this is what we got. This is what we're dealing with right now. And then obviously it just gets way better. But yeah, I mean, look at the size, like, look at CD players, like, how they were just these huge elaborate systems. And then eventually they got to a point where there was skip protection and, it went in your pocket instead of this big machine you needed and shit. Like, I mean, they always get better and better and better. But yeah, the 4 to 5 minute load times. I mean, again, at the time you were just like, this is the way it is. This is how we do things. So
yeah, you kind of had to plan ahead in a way. And if you wanted to play a game, you had to kind of really think about it. You thought, well, am I really willing to invest 5 minutes right now to play this game?
Right.
So in order for a game to be frequently played, it had to be really, really good, because you would have to not only just enjoy it, but you would have to be willing to invest that 5 minutes to wait for it to start.
Exactly.
So for me, I could probably list off some games that I was willing to wait for. There was one particular Pac-Man clone. Of course, there was probably a Pac-Man clone on every machine back then.
Right.
And certainly the BBC Micro as well in my school. It had a bunch of games. I had quite a few games, some not so good, some really good. So Bubble Bobble is a definite good example. I love that. Quick Snacks. Have you heard of a character? I'm not sure if he broke the States at all. A character called Dizzy.
Not that I can think of. No, I'm gonna look that up as well. Like,
basically an egg.
I just Google search Dizzy character and I see it's a picture of an egg.
Yeah, he's
an egg with a hat and boxing gloves.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, he was like, I thought, could I call him the Mario of the UK?
Gotcha.
I could call him that. That's actually not a really bad way to label him. So he was created by 2 British guys, I think, called the Oliver Twins, and he's like a long-running series of Treasure Island Dizzy and stuff like that. And there was one other game, which was kind of a maze game, really awesome soundtrack, called Quick Snacks. And that was one particular game that I really played like crazy. There must have been others. Space Harrier. Although in hindsight, the Space Harrier version that I played was rubbish compared to what was actually available, because the trees were like wireframe. Most of it was wireframe.
Gotcha.
So there was no crisp imagery. The dragon boss that would fly around the screen was, I feel like that was wireframe as well. So yeah, not a very good port at all. But of course I didn't know any better back then, and so I loved it.
I mean, did any of us know better back then? Like, there was always games that were just trash or not good or broken, and we just didn't care because it was video games.
Or you're in denial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. You're just like
when you
this
played
is good, right?
the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game.
Yeah, that game was trash.
Because I had that. Oh, that's quite a nice little sort of a connection to what you said earlier about copyright. So I had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. I wish I kept this one. It was in a lovely little box, and it had this booklet with it, as most games do. But this booklet was quite special. So in order to, because copyright or copying games was becoming quite an issue.
Right.
I think it's particular. I feel like it could have been all, but I feel like it was particularly ZX Spectrum Games, which was another very popular microcomputer in the UK. And there was no copyright protection whatsoever. People were just copying it to regular cassettes with no issue. So they had to really get on it. So how they thought about doing it was, I think later on they were able to sort of put an actual block so it could not be copied straight up.
Right.
But the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game had a kind of different way of doing it. It came with a booklet, and in the booklet you had these 2 pages. And they also made it purposely hard to read. No, not hard to read, hard to photocopy as well. It was like a burgundy page with black text. It's a really elaborate, desperate, almost a desperate attempt to try and stop people from copying new games. So basically, if you copied this game, you needed this booklet, really. So they made the page impossible to photocopy. So on the page, there was a grid. And it was a classic letters down the side, numbers up the top sort of grid. And when you loaded up the game, it would say enter number at location A14 or something like that. So you'd be holding this page up to about 2 inches from your face, trying to read this burgundy page with black text, looking for this 4-digit code, getting it wrong probably at least twice.
Right.
And of course this book was precious. If you scratched that page or you lost that page or something like that, or it faded, you're done. Or you have to hope that you'll get one of the numbers you can actually read. So, but no, I managed to keep it. That's probably why they had the box. Really, I managed to keep it in good nick. But again, that's one of the games I really would like to get my hands on again because there's something quite special about it. Boxed games weren't really that common. I don't think it was mostly plastic cassette cases for these games. So yeah, that was a really elaborate method of trying to combat copyright.
And people say DRMs are a problem. Like, sorry, you had to have a book in order to even work this game. Like I was gonna say with computer games, it was copy protection or just copyright infringement in general was so rampant. Like people were just copying things left and right, didn't give a shit. I mean, they didn't care at all. Like Nintendo and all those, like that was way harder to do because you had to have a cartridge, and that's where, at least Nintendo for the longest time with their copy protection because, you had to have the Nintendo cart in order to be able to do it, and then eventually people got around it. But I mean, yeah, like as soon as they started, it's funny because, like I said, discs, like floppy disk cassettes, I can imagine those being easy to copy. CD-ROMs, like with Dreamcast, dude, I remember so many people having Dreamcasts, like just being able to rip the disc and copy it left and right. PlayStation 1, I remember a buddy of mine. I
was going to say that.
Yeah, PlayStation 1 had like a Game Shark attachment that'd go on the back that had a spring that went in the disc tray where you would put in a game that was an original like an actual PlayStation game. It would get past that initial boot screen, and then you'd like literally open up the tray as the PlayStation logo comes on and pop in a burned game, and it would just work. And I was just like,
oh, interesting.
Wow. Yeah, it was really weird because that was the way to get past that initial boot up. Because if you just put the burned game in, it wouldn't read. So you would put in a game, and like the spring that you would put in, it's like basically what it was a spring you put in where the disc tray was. So even if you if you open up the disc tray, it wouldn't, like it would still act like the disc tray was closed. So it wouldn't reset the console or anything like that. So basically,
it's so elaborate.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, essentially, you would get past that boot screen, and, you'd see the PlayStation logo. You'd literally pop open up the disc tray, take the actual, and it didn't matter what game it was. You just had to get past that boot screen. And then you just put the disc of whatever burn game you want to play, close the ding, and it would just boot up like the game was in there. And I was like, wow. I mean, but also, too, that was back when, like, copying CDs was, like, amazing. That was like, oh, my God, this is... You had a CD burner, man. That's crazy. But
One of my first jobs when I was a trainee, I worked for this computer company, and we actually didn't myself, but it was kind of a secret operation in the back, if you like, and they would happily ship PlayStations. So did you have anything? I can't imagine you must have had it as well. There was a way of not hacking, but a way of
like a hard chip that would be installed on PlayStations and everything. Yeah, I remember them being a thing. I don't remember anybody ever having it. The only thing I ever remember seeing people having was like that Game Shark attachment that went on the back of the PlayStation for the modding. But I remember there was like, if I remember correctly, because my father-in-law at one point in time owned a video game store. Like him and my brother-in-law owned their own video game store, and he said that he did it to like one or two. My father-in-law like did it, but he never like advertised it like bring your PlayStation here and get it shipped or whatever. But it was just like, hey, one of their buddies wanted to see if it was possible, and my father-in-law took it as like a challenge, like, hey, let me crack this, because you had to like hard solder the thing inside, right?
I watched them do it. Yeah,
that was something that wasn't like a quick pop open, like that was like pop open, get solder it to the board, all that stuff. Yeah, the one my buddy had was simply just plugged in the back Game Shark. It was like, and you could detach it and put it on any PlayStation if you wanted to. Like, it was really weird. And again, it wasn't an actual Game Shark, but it was something similar to that, where it just like snapped onto the back of the console. But yeah, I think
I sort of remember that actually. Didn't Sony go after them for it?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Was there a company called Game Genie that made that Game Shark?
Well, I believe it was, yeah. But I mean, because I remember initially Game Shark was just for it was the same thing that Game Genie was, right? It was just, like getting extra lives and getting infinite lives and infinite ammo and all that shit. Like, that's initially what it was to begin with. And I think that's when people found out you can do all this next level shit with it. That's when they were like, oh, yeah, you can't be doing that. And then that's right when they cleared that out. But, yeah, I mean, I remember people having Game Shark for legitimate reasons, but he had one, and I was just like, what are you doing with that? And then he showed me, and I was just like, amazed.
Whoa.
But also, yeah, exactly. I was like, holy shit, what are you doing, man? That's insane. But again, at the time, like, CD burners weren't relevant to anybody that he just like, oh, my uncle, man, he knows a guy. I'm like, of course your uncle knows a guy, because everybody's uncle knows a guy that can do some shady shit. And yeah, I mean, he was just like, yeah, I just get games, and he didn't get them often, but I mean, he would just get games, and they would just be black Sharpie written on a CD-ROM, and I was like, dude, that's crazy. And of course, they had those old, I don't know if you remember this, the very old, back in the day, CD-ROMs, like the old, like, burnable disc that, like, if you scratched the top of the disc, your data was gone. Like, there wasn't that, like, hard protective layer. Like, it literally...
No, I don't remember that.
I saw discs back in the day that were so fragile that the top didn't have, like, a hard coating on the top. So, like, if you were to, like, say, like, accidentally scratch the top of the disc, it would actually read through that was the data that was written on. So, like, you would fuck the disc up if you did that. I remember them, like, some of them getting left out in the sun and them, like, flaking away. I'm like, what is this shit? Like, where's, like... Normal CDs don't have that. It's just one of those weird things. So, but I mean, again, you never had that with like Nintendo and Genesis and stuff like that. I know there was people that had like third-party cartridges, and like one of the guys I talked to on the show before, he talked about how he had obviously it was a Genesis, but it was Mega Drive in Europe, and there was just a lot of like bootleg shit that he played on that too. So, I mean, there's like, obviously it wasn't extremely hard to do because people were doing it, but it just, obviously in PC world, it was just way more prevalent. But yeah, that's fine. So you had the Amstrad, you had the BBC Micro, played on those. Did you eventually, like, were those kind of to the point where those were the big systems then, or like did Nintendo or Sega ever make an impact, like where you were?
So for not really, no, because I think at the time, I think we're talking about it must have been about 1990 here,
right?
When I got this machine, 91, 90, somewhere around there. So the Mega Drive was underway. And was getting a good foothold in Europe.
Right.
The NES was out and doing its thing. So yeah, we did have the Mega Drive and the Super NES eventually, and they did eventually take over and push all the microcomputers out aside.
Right.
The Amstrad did quite decently. I think it sold like 2 million units or something like that. So it did quite well. But but all my friends had Mega Drives and Super NESs and NESs and arguably better computers as well. So my family wasn't super wealthy or even that well off. We were very, very working class.
Right.
And so I had this Amstrad for a good few years. And in order to make it interesting and keep using it, I gradually taught myself some basic 1.1 code and started writing my own text adventures and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
But I had a friend who lived down the road from me, and his family was a little bit better off than mine. So he was getting like the Mega Drive and the Super NES, and so I was getting a lot of my stuff from him. So eventually, what would happen? He gave me his Mega Drive. I think I swapped for something. I can't remember what it was. I think it was CDs or something. And he gave me his Mega Drive because he already had the PlayStation 1. And I think I had his Super NES and his Master System as well. So I was always kind of one generation behind. And I think that's why nowadays I am, and I always say this, I always class myself as more of a retro gamer than anything. The most modern console I own is the OG Xbox. Don't get me wrong, I am on market for PS4 and Switch and stuff like that. But I feel like I would rather spend a bunch of money on all of these games from history, you know. So yeah, so I had the Amstrad for a long time. Well, to give you a good example, I wrote a text adventure about Grand Theft Auto. No, actually, no, it wasn't about Grand Theft Auto. It was with Grand Theft Auto in mind, but it was South Park inspired. It was South Park themed.
Nice.
It was terrible. And I never finished it. I never did finish games. You would start with a great idea and never finish it. So, and eventually then I got my friend's PlayStation. The first time I bought myself an actual console, brand new, off the shelf, was a PS2. So up until that point, I was kind of like one generation behind, pretty much.
Well, again, though, I mean, like you said, you had different tastes and everything. Like, you were more into the retro stuff, which is completely fine. I mean, there's people out there who they enjoy gaming as much as the next person, but also, too, their joy is collecting retro stuff instead of just playing new stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it really, I mean, doesn't matter where you want to go with it. And then, of course, the term gamer now is so broad. Like, there's no, especially now, because now, you know, you have technically real fast your mom playing Words with Friends on her phone. She's playing a game that considers her a quote unquote gamer in the eyes of surveys that are out there. You know what I mean? There's people that play mobile games and that's their games. There's people out there who just focus on the new, whatever the newest, like there's people that play Call of Duty and Madden in the States or Call of Duty and FIFA, and that's all they play, and that's all they give a shit about. And, you know, they might consider themselves gamers. But, you know, there is a complete subset of people who don't buy any new shit and just go after collecting and just, you know, the thrill of getting an entire collection of whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, people love that shit. So, yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with it. I mean, people have their own unique things. I mean, I like the fact that, you know, you creating your own games is pretty awesome. Like, that, you know, you creating your own text adventures and stuff. Because, well, again, I mean, that's not something that most people can say that they've done. Like, a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm a gamer, but you're like, hey, I made my own text adventures. Like, that's still kind of cool. What
was really funny, though, is that I created them at a time when the Amstrad was cassette-based games were virtually dead. So, in a sense, I was kind of just creating them for me. But I knew I even added cheats to them, which is really strange because, again, only I was going to play it. So I just thought, and because of my limited knowledge, I would create weird cheats which would change like the color of the screen or show some of the characters into like icons of different things or something like that. I think I managed to create a character that vaguely resembled Kenny McCormick,
right?
Like an actual ASCII character, where it's a grid of dots.
Oh, okay.
4x8, I think. Oh, is that it? Or 5x8? I can't remember the actual layout, but you just tell the computer where to lay the dots and where not to lay the dots. So you're basically building it from scratch. So that becomes then like a character just as much as a letter of the alphabet.
Right.
And then, of course, typing in this code. Then I think it was "You Kill Kenny." I think was the code. Or something like that. And then the outline of the screen would change to all orange icons of Kenny. So I was having all this fun with it and messing around, but I think it was because deep down I just really wanted to create my own games, and I'm surprised I didn't go down that road for a career. It never really occurred to me, or computers in general, just programming. I could not do anything with a computer right now.
Like now it's it's
C,
kind of
C Sharp, C Plus, and all that. Yeah, it's way more advanced than Basic 1.1. And I never really completed any of those games. I mean, the game that I ended up calling for some reason South Park Speedway, it wasn't a racing game. I ended up abandoning because it got so big. Because I couldn't get my head around the code.
Right.
I used way more elaborate methods to create imagery on the screen. So it was it would be a lot easier if I knew how to draw lines and things on the screen.
Right.
And boxes, but all my boxes were like full square ASCII characters. So the game got huge and huge and huge to such a point where it actually took nearly half an hour to load.
Oh my God.
And I thought, what am I doing? I don't know how I did this. I just toyed with it one day. I had this paintbrush paintbrush software for my Amstrad,
right?
And I drew a rather decent pixelated image of the South Park characters, very much in the style of early first and second series South Park. So you had the alien spaceship in the sky.
Like the old, like back in the day when they actually used to cut out like the cardboard kind of pieces and stuff. Yeah, like those super crude stuff back in season 1 and 2. Yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely was crude, and I got the characters pretty much nailed, really, as far as the Cartman being sort of rotund and Kenny and Kyle, Kenny and Stan virtually the same size. So
right.
Proportion-wise and all that, I got a spot on. I got the aliens in the background. I would love to see that again, because back then I thought it was awesome. But I bet if I were to see it again, I'd be like, "What is this?"
Well, again, I mean that's the case with most games not made by yourself. Like that's the case with games you go back and play like that were made by other people. You're like, "Man, that game was awesome." And then you go back and go, "What is this trash? What am I doing?" I mean, of course, you're going to be your own biggest critic, but yeah, I can imagine it be. I mean, the funny thing is, like you were mentioning how you didn't go down the programming route. I remember for the longest time, I kept telling my family I want to make video games. I want to be a video game programmer.
I think every boy does at some point.
I'm pretty sure, except for I was like, I just kept saying that. I didn't eventually change. I was like, I just kept saying it, and then in high school, I think I was like 10th or 11th grade, something like that. We had a computer programming class in high school. And I was like, well, if I'm going to go down this road, I need to kind of get shit figured out. So I took that class, and they had us do this program. Dude, well, no. So they had us do this programming, and they had us do all this code and all this shit. And then they were like, all right, guys, go ahead and hit the button and see what happens on screen. And I did it, and like a fucking circle came on screen. And I'm like, I did all of that for a circle. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, how do you do 3D characters? I don't want to begin to do this. And I literally, as soon as that was the only class that I literally was just like, this just lost every interest in me being a game programmer. I was like, I cannot imagine the shit you have to do to make a video game work. Like, that's insane. Granted, there's engines that make it all easier, you know, like I get it. Yeah. Like there's Unity and there's Unreal and there's like engines out there that can make it happen, but dude, that was like the rudest wake-up call. I was like, oh my god, this is going to take a lot of work to do this, and I immediately just got turned off by it. I was like, I was so upset. I was so bummed. It was like crushing. At the end of that class, I was just like, damn, that was a lot of work for just a little circle on the screen. So, but it's okay. I mean, again, everybody has their own path, and, you know, again, it's okay. Just go back and look at it. Just here's what you should do. You should make a YouTube video. Just do that. Just go back and just record that and see how that. You'll get some views, especially when you type in South Park Speedway and it's not a racing game.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was kind of like a questing game where you would where. I can't remember exactly. I think you could choose a character, you would tune from school, and you would run errands for everyone. And I don't know why you had to tune from school for that, but it seemed naughty, and cool. So it would be like Mr. Mackey would ask you to go grab a sandwich from the shop, and you do it. And along the way, you would avoid things like I don't know. I think I called them a truant officer or something like that, or the police, or accidentally or. Have you ever heard of a game called? I think it was a freeware sort of. What's the word? Sort of homebrew game called Dope Wars.
It rings a bell, but I never played it. I can definitely.
Chances are you probably in the early days of the internet. I think a lot of people played this game because it was really quite crude, but people loved it because it was drugs, and they thought they were edgy and all that. 90s. Yeah. And it was kind of like that in a way, where like you would do something and it'd be like almost like an RPG in a sense, where like this would happen. So I would use random number generators to decide the outcome, and this is weird because I had no idea of anything about anything similar like Dungeons and Dragons. I had no idea I was doing exactly that or anything like. And this was well before Dope Wars, so I'm not trying to say I'm some sort of pioneer or anything, but it was quite interesting that I didn't realize what I was doing. That was basically creating a text-based RPG without knowing what an RPG even was.
Right.
Although I think obviously Dungeons and Dragons was well before this, but I had no idea why I was creating basically like an RPG game. Even though there were games out there that were doing this, there were RPGs based on and text-based RPGs based on Dungeons and Dragons. So I found that quite interesting.
By the way, if you want to play Dope Wars, it's on the Google Play at store. I just did search for Dope Wars, and it's like Dope Wars Classic apps on Google Play. I'm like, wow. They again, how easy? Like again, that's like a programmer's thing. Like, let me just try to make this an app instead. So, and apparently there was another game called Drug Wars, and Dope Wars were like this. They look very similar, but yeah, it's like acid, cocaine, heroin, smack. I was like,
hashish
wow.
And all this. Yeah, you had to buy and sell, buy low, sell high, basically, and
right.
While avoiding, I think the police and drug dealers, other rival drug dealers, and well, that's about it. That's about it. I think, as far as I can recall, gangs and stuff like that. So you'd be like. If I remember correctly, it was something like you're attacked by or you're approached by a rival drug dealer. What do? Do you run away? Do you fight? And then he would tell you what happened as a consequence. So like you suffer 5 points of damage and lose $200 or something like that.
Right, exactly.
That was the basic thing, and that was kind of what I did with South Park Speedway. It was well, I don't think I actually come to think of it. I don't think I actually got that far, but that was the idea.
Right, but I mean, like, just again, like that's so cool that you were able to figure that out and do it. And of course, you were doing the same thing everybody else was doing. You just stole South Park assets and just made your own character. You just made a game out of South Park. That's okay. You were just as bad as everybody who stole Defender and Pac-Man, but that's okay. No, I mean, that's so cool. I mean, to be able to do those types of things. Again, the creative side of things, I never was in for that. I obviously was more into computers, and again, I thought programming until I took a programming class, and I was like, God, I didn't know what the hell programming was, apparently, because this is like way harder than I thought. But at least you had that creative outlet, and I mean, everybody has a creative outlet.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, again, that would be something you should definitely throw up on a YouTube channel. Be like, hey, we should just go revisit this and see how bad I was then. Let's go. It's funny though. I don't think that the drawings of the characters would be far off from that first season of South Park, because they were rough. They were really rough.
Could even, if I remember correctly, you could even see the shadows under the cardboard.
Yeah, it's like
from the studio lights and that. Yeah,
yeah. Like I remember, like you go back and look at some of those first episodes, like the Cartman Anal Probe episode, and you're like, "Holy shit, have they come a long way?" Like
how far have you come? Yeah.
How far we have come, and it's crazy. That show's still great. It's still funny. How does that happen?
It's still awesome. It's arguably I do feel it is my favorite show still on TV right now.
It's so good. And then, of course, the South Park games getting good again was great. Yeah, Fractured Butthole, Stick of Truth.
The last South Park game I played, I've not played the new ones. I think the last one I played was, trying to think of which came first. I think it was South Park Chef's Love Shack, actually.
Right, on like 64, PlayStation, that type of stuff.
PlayStation, yeah. Although what I found interesting is I used to play it, but it was almost entirely about American culture, TV culture, and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, who's Leonard Maltin? I have no idea. I remember there was a question about Leonard Maltin, and I just remember Chef going, "Damn, Leonard Maltin, something." It sticks in my head for some reason. I can't remember what the question was. I think there was a bunch of questions that said Leonard Maltin for some reason.
That's a funny thing to think about, like. If you have a game like that, that's all pop culture references and stuff. Because, of course, like, the internet was around, but not something that was, like, like, building together communities and, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, the pop culture in the U.S. compared to England, compared to Japan, compared to Korea, it was all so damn different. So I can't even imagine certain games getting over to you guys and you just going, I don't know what the hell any of this is. Like, what is any of this? Like, who is that person? What is that show? You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine that happening, but,
who is Leonard Maltin anyway?
I don't know. No, we'll Google it later. Yeah, if you guys want to find out, because I don't know.
I'll Google it later.
Yeah, there you go. But no, and real quick though, obviously when you get a chance, when you get the new consoles, those new South Park games, phenomenal. They're literally 15-hour episodes of the TV show. They're fantastic. They're so good. And, yeah, dude, but there was, again, like, those licensed games, like, those first South Park games, though, some of those were rough, dude. Like, the actual game called South Park, yeah, that first-person shooter one was just such a weak attempt at just catching on to that first-person shooter train that everybody was on, you know, like GoldenEye and everything. They were just like, fuck it, just throw Cartman. He's throwing yellow snowballs at people. Go.
Like Giant Turkey. I remember the Giant Turkey boss, which was like absurdly powerful. Like
right.
Not powerful, but he took a beating. He didn't really. I think you were chasing it. I can't remember if you fought it. I think you were chasing it, if I recall. Right. And I think Cartman makes a comment and says like, "Damn, this turkey's tough."
Yeah.
And now they say that, I suddenly just realised that's actually a joke, isn't it? There's something about overcooking it, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Like a really rubbish joke about turkey meats. I don't know.
That was, and the graphics in them were just like, yeah. Again, it's like, it was around that time when South Park took over the world, and like, Kenny was on everything, and then they were just like, fuck it. I think Acclaim made the game too, which they just made just such bad games all the time. And I'm sure they were just like, fuck it, just put it in a game, we'll figure it out later. Yeah, it was Acclaim. God, that was not a good game. And yeah, like again, it was just like, you just saw, the characters were okay modeled, but like, man,
you can see the edges even though on their faces.
Hard. Yeah, and my favorite thing is like, I'm looking at screenshots of it now. It's so like foggy in the city, and that's probably because the draw distances couldn't be there because they were just so bad.
Silent Hill method, yeah.
Exactly. Like, just make the draw distances next to nothing, so that way it can run the game actually well. But yeah, dude, Chef's Love Shack was basically just a trivia game. That's like all it was. And again, all the kids,
quiz game, yeah.
Yeah, and all the kids were like, "Oh man, let's go get that game." And then you find out it's like that, and you're like, "I don't want that shit." Like,
some of the mini games are fun though.
They are.
I particularly remember getting, because if I remember correctly, you couldn't select them. I think there was a code to unlock them or something, but you couldn't select them. They were quite random.
Right.
I can't remember if you spun a wheel or something like that to choose the game. But there was one game that I would always look forward to because it was genuinely fun. It was a snowball game, where all the characters were holding trays, if I recall. No. It wasn't snowball. It was a kind of dodgeball kind of game.
Okay.
It was an orange-red ball, and you'd be bouncing it back and forth with a tray. And the idea, of course, was to not get hit. And the ball would bounce all around the screen. And you'd have Cartman, Kenny, Stan, and Kyle all in the corner of the screen. And, of course, you'd be one of them, and the others would be AI. So it was just a fun, simple, dumb game, really. Actually, I think I have South Park Chef's Love Shack. I might dig that out later and give it a whirl. Because it's been a long time since
talking about it, yeah. I just looked at the N64 South Park video game box art, and apparently it was expansion pack compatible, which is fucking ridiculous to think about. It's like, apparently if you had the expansion pack, it looked better. okay. And of course, and I
I'll
mentioned
take your word for it.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the draw distances were like bigger. And then I forgot that there was South Park Rally, which was a South Park racing game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was so frustrating.
Yeah, forgot about that. Again, Mario Kart, they were like, let's just throw South Park in a kart game. Might as well, because Crash had one and everybody had one when Mario Kart got popular. But, yeah, it's just... And of course, like South Park for some reason had 4-player multiplayer, because again, I mentioned this in the last podcast I just recorded. If it was on 64, I think Nintendo fucking made everybody do 4 players. Like, they were like, no, you gotta do some 4-player shit, because we have 4 players on the system. We could do 4 players. Everybody's got 4 controllers because of GoldenEye. We need 4 players something in this game. So, yeah, I mean, again,
I think South Park is kind of, is one of those things where I think it would have been necessary just because of the 4 characters,
right?
Because everyone has their favorite character.
Sense.
So if you had to jump on the game and you had to play Cartman or Stan,
right.
or only 2 people could play at a time, and they were I don't know, but the idea of being able to choose from, because it was always about those 4 kids, so they're all likable. Some people loved Kyle, some people loved Stan, some people loved Kenny and Cartman, and they all had their different personalities. So yeah, I think that fits nicely as a 4-player game. But
exactly.
I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense though, because there's 4.
I think it was the first 4-player console. It was the first one with four ports.
Yeah, that was like, and yeah, that's where I've noted. Yeah, that's definitely the one that came out of the jump that had 4 ports built in. Obviously, like NES, Super Nintendo, all these had like, and PlayStation had multi-tap where you could have 4 players, but like the games weren't designed ever for 4 players. Like they just weren't. Yes, there was an option, and most of the time it was sports games that took advantage of like more than 2 players. But then 64 happened and they made 4 players so common. Like they were just like, no, we have enough control ports on this thing. We're going to focus on multiplayer. And so many games, even games that shouldn't have had 4-player multiplayer did. Obviously the South Park game, like you said, now that you're saying it, that makes sense. What's funny is now in the new South Park games, you don't play as any of the kids. You play as like a brand new kid, and they refer to you as New Kid. So it's, dude, yeah, please, when you get a chance, check those out. I mean, those are good. So like you said, you were kind of a console generation behind. So you had the Mega Drive. And I'm assuming you kind of played the same shit that everybody did. Like, that was the other thing too, is that there was a delay in games coming out from America to Europe and vice versa, because there were some games that would come out in Europe first and not America, and then the other way around. A lot of the times it was like Japan, then America's, then Europe's, or around America, Europe at the same time. Were there ever any games that you heard about that, like, I'm assuming most of the games came over. I very rarely think that a game wouldn't come to Europe if it was in America.
Yeah, I think there's very few North American exclusives on Europe the same way as well. Quite a few Japan exclusives, but the only game that I can think of that had a bit of a delay, had a delay for both North America and Europe. So, and that's Super Mario Bros. 3. I think it had I think it was 3 years behind.
It was
Japan,
so
I think.
Big, yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
yeah. Mario Bros. 3 was like the release date in Japan was way longer, and that, again, like, imagine that shit happening now, dude. People would fucking riot in the streets. They would lose their minds. Like, yeah, so like, I'm looking at that right now. October 23rd in Japan, 1988. So October 1998 in Japan. In North America, it was February of 1990. And then in the PAL version is August of 1991, which is fucking crazy to think about. Wow. That's like almost 3 years later it came out. Whoa, that's crazy.
Makes you wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I can't
really...
think of a reason.
What's that?
I said I can't think of a reason why.
Yeah, I can't either. I mean, again, like, I get translating, but it's not like from North America to the Europe version takes a year, more than a year, like a year and a half almost. Like, that's insane. Again, I couldn't imagine that happening now. I remember there was some Nintendo game that came out. I want to say it was like a Kirby game. Not like the one that just came out, but like maybe one sooner than that, or like a Yoshi game that for whatever reason came up in Europe first. And I don't know why, but it was actually in Europe before it was in America. It was really And again, this was more recent.
Yoshi's Cookie, maybe?
No. It was like a newer game, like a newer Yoshi or a newer Kirby game that actually like was released in Europe first. And I think by like a week or two. So it wasn't months or years or any crazy shit like that. But I mean, it was still odd that like games still have that situation where they don't launch day and date everywhere in the world. You know what I mean? I get like Japan, certain games in Japan being translated and stuff, but also too, most games now, if it's coming out in Japan, it's coming out like everywhere. You know what I mean? Like they've gotten to the point where they hold off and just translate everything to where it's worldwide release day one, so this shit doesn't happen anymore. But holy shit, dude, it took you guys almost 3 years to get Mario 3. Wow. Like, did you ever like read up gaming magazines or anything like that to like hear where other things were happening in the world?
Actually, no. I'm just trying to think. I remember going into, there's some well-known shops in the UK that were frequented full of magazines, like one called W.H. Smith's. And I remember frequently going in there with my mum, and she would buy some magazine, I have no idea, and I was always look up at the games magazines, but I never felt inclined to sort of read up on them, on the games. I think it's because I was behind. Like I had my Amstrad, and I don't think they were really marketed all that much. Like, I don't think anyone cared.
Right.
I think it was more about. I think probably for me, at one point, it got to the point where the Mega Drive and the Super NES were like too far away from me, like too pie in the sky. It's like I couldn't possibly. I would never have one of those. Maybe I have to wait till I get old and get a job or something like that. You know, because I knew they were back then way outside affordability for my family. So. I was plugged away on my Amstrad, and like I say, there probably was. I think there was a magazine called CPC World or something like that. I could be wrong, but they weren't very common. It's all Games Master was one particular magazine I remember. It was actually a TV show as well, I think. It was a TV show, but I can't remember if they were the same thing. I just remember the logo. I'm pretty sure it was identical, so I assume they were tied to each other. No, I didn't read magazines much at all. Just went to these markets, picked up a game I liked the look of. I remember having a text adventure game about cricket, and I don't know why. Because I have no interest in cricket. I think it's because I stood there for ages looking at these games, and my mum was going, "Come on, Dave, make a decision." And for some reason,
that card. We gotta go. We got things to do. Hurry up! And then you got that pressure. You're like, just this one. And
but we had all these games about demons and wizards and monsters and fighting and guns, and I pick up one about cricket, and I cannot fathom how I managed that, because I really don't like cricket at all. I never have. It's bizarre, but no, that was how I looked for my games and how I knew about them was by going to these markets in all these sort of like seaside kind of towns that we would go to on the weekend. Didn't really have my finger on the pulse. I'll say that.
Right. And I kind of was, I was in the same boat where, I was mostly just into gaming as far as like, I just found out what was popular with other kids and kind of played that shit. I didn't really like, I occasionally would get a gaming magazine, and back in the day, like, if you bought a gaming magazine, it was 90% ads for just shit that was coming out. You know what I mean? Which, most magazines, to be honest, are still that way. If you pick up a magazine now, it's 90% advertisements. But
3 ads before you get to the first page.
Yeah, exactly. But no, that was like the one. I remember just getting like gaming magazines once in a while and just like pawing over it and just like looking at every one of the ads and like, man, this game looks good. This game looks good. And eventually, again, my family wasn't very well off, so it's not like I had access to buy all these games, but I just kept looking at certain games. But I was always just like kind of into whatever was popular at the time. You know what I mean? Like in the States, it was Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam on Genesis, and PlayStation, it was Final Fantasy and Resident Evil. And, I was all over those types of games. So, that's just kind of what I stuck with. But like those gaming magazines were just, again, they didn't talk about other regions often. They just kind of talked about what was happening where you were, you know what I mean, in your region and everything. So sometimes you get the thing like, out of Japan, they're doing this, or you'd hear the rumors like, oh, this new Final Fantasy is coming out, or, whatever they would do. So that happened from time to time.
I particularly remember, I don't know where I got this, but I remember having one particular magazine And it had a mix of everything, if I recall. I think there was Super NES stuff and Mega Drive stuff, and I could be wrong. I think it might have been entirely CPC things. But I do remember particularly being obsessed. And I played this game. I've never owned it, but I have played this game, and it's actually okay. But I became particularly obsessed with this. Is quite random, with screenshots of a game called Turrican. Or Super Turrican, I think this version was called. And it's basically a shooter, shooter platform, or run and gunner, basically.
Right.
And because the imagery, it was a good example of how like quality images and color can really grab a person.
Right.
Because these screenshots I was looking at are these really vivid orange and gold and silver and bright greens and bright blues, and this stunning screenshot. Looking back now, it wasn't really that impressive, really. I could think of tons of games that are way better looking, but for some reason I was really obsessed with this game. So yeah, I do remember that for some reason, like having this magazine or some sort of book. I can't remember what it was, some sort of compilation magazine.
On you. I mean, because obviously you're remembering it many, many years later, so... I just remember, like, the only games, like, I remember, I never was into, like, Nintendo Power, because that was more just Nintendo, and, like, after a Nintendo, like, the NES, I went, Sega and then PlayStation. Like, I didn't, really stick with Nintendo really going forward. But no, I had, like, EGM, like, Electronic Gaming Monthly, like, that was just, dude, it was so damn big, and it was just, like, here's covering everything, and, dude, yeah, I mean, again, I would just stare over the stuff that was there, and of course, some of them had cheat codes, like, you kept to, like, certain gaming magazines that had cheat codes for the games you had, like, or you'd go buy the magazine because it had the cheat codes in it for the game you had at the time, so that was
pre-internet.
Yeah, exactly. And then the internet happened, and then fucking cheat codes went away, too, because now there's microtransactions, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, as soon as the internet, I remember there was, I have a really funny story. Apparently, so there was a website called cheatcc.com.
That was my first one. I remember that. I was going to mention it a moment ago. That was my go-to website.
Everyone went to, and it was Cheat Code Central, and everybody went there, and they would type in their game, and they'd get cheat codes and all that stuff. Apparently, and I did not know this until my friend came back to school and bitched me out. I told him about it. I'm like, yeah, there's this website, Cheat Code Central, and I told him the website. Apparently, he forgot what the website was, so he typed in, completely out, Cheat Code Central. Apparently, it took him to a porn site right in front of his parents. And he came back to school and lit me the fuck up. He's like, what is wrong with you, dude? I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he explained everything to me. I'm like, dude, the website cheatcc.com. He's like, what? And he's like, oh. And he's like, dude, my parents freaked the fuck out. I told them I was like, wow. Well, I know now not to go there. like I know not to do that shit. But yeah, that was again. I told him the website proper. It's not my fault he didn't listen. Right? He should have listened better. It's okay. Sorry, Brandon, if you're listening. You're not, but it's okay. So obviously, you mentioned like how you went. You had Sega, and then you went PlayStation. And then obviously you had PS2, but yeah. You were still, so at the time, like, you're getting the newest stuff. Obviously, you bought the PlayStation 2 yourself, but you're still kind of just more, like, looking back at the retro stuff. Was there a point in time when you kind of, like, didn't care about at all getting the newest stuff? I mean, obviously, like, right now, you don't have it as we speak right now, but, I mean, was there, like, when PlayStation and 360, or PS3 and 360 and all those came out, were you at a point where you're just like, I don't even care about the new stuff at all? Like, I just want to keep going back?
Kind of, yeah. I think that was quite recent, or at least within the last 5 years, I'd say, where I started like being more interested in the history of video games.
Right.
And then I wanted to own them. Then I wanted to have these important games and all these milestone games and complete collections and things like that. So when I got to the point where I bought the PS2, that was when I had my first job.
Right.
And so that was when I had, money coming in. And I lived with my mum at the time, and she didn't really ask for much as far as, because when I don't know, I feel like this is a British tradition, but I get it might be an American thing as well, where you get to the age where you're kind of expected to pay rent in a way,
yeah,
or lodge, as my mother would call it. So yeah, I would only give her £20 a week, and back then wasn't worth much because I was earning somewhere in the equivalent of like 200 every week. So for like, I think I must have been about, I can't remember how old I was, probably about 18 or 19, somewhere around there. And that was the first time where I had like disposable income, literal disposable income, where I didn't really have anything to spend on. I didn't have bills to pay, just that 20 quid, and the other 180 was mine. So eventually it just sort of built up, and I had something like £500 through £300-400 to spend, something like that, something decent. And I walked into one of the bigger companies that's sadly gone now, called Woolworths. Well, not gone. I think they've just left the UK. I don't know what happened, but that store is gone now, long gone. But I went in there and I saw a PS2. But the odd thing is, one of my primary motivation to buy it was because it was a DVD player as well.
Yeah, that was such a big deal for PS2, because like that was an easy
such a grabber,
easy sell. Like, oh, by the way, this plays DVDs. DVD players are 500, whatever.
Yeah,
they were equivalent in price. Like.
Yeah, and it pushed then Nintendo to create like an add-on for their GameCube then, because they realized that was it a GameCube? Yeah, I think it was the GameCube.
Yeah,
it might have been. Yeah, pretty sure it was the GameCube. That would have eventually led to the Panasonic Q. Have you seen that?
Right. Yeah, they actually like that. It's all built into one, which is crazy.
It's an odd-looking machine, but it just doesn't look like a game console. It looks like an early 2000s CD player. You know, it's got that sort of gloss about it, like mirrored effects and that. But yeah, that was my primary purchase. And so technically the first thing I bought for my PS2 was a compilation of Die Hard 1 and 2, which is quite interesting. It came with a game, actually. It came with it came with a demo disc, actually. I remember playing a game called Alter Echo, which was like a hack and slash sort of sci-fi game. It had a demo for SSX Tricky. So yeah, anyway, I think the first game I actually bought for it was Devil May Cry, I'm pretty sure.
Such a good game too. Like, that's a good first game.
I remember playing that game, and I was just blown away by that game. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to thought. So that was the first time I bought something brand new, and then because I was young, I was kind of stupid. I wasn't really keeping track of money and stuff like that, and I wasn't very good with money in general. So I moved out of my parents' home, and in a ill thought out effort to become independent, I moved in with a mate of mine. That didn't work out, and of course then I ended up not earning very much money at all. So for quite a while, it was kind of just paying bills. So again, I just didn't have money.
Sure.
So what I found myself doing then again is going back to the old stuff.
Right.
So I was buying like secondhand consoles. I was buying secondhand games, and back then PS1 games were going for like £2 a piece, £3 a piece. Obviously, because of a bit of a retro renaissance that we're going through, if you like, of late.
Well, now it's sad that PlayStation 1 is retro when you think about your life.
We got to that point now. I would even class PS2 as retro. I think of retro as 2 generations and back.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I would say 100% PS1 64. That would be considered retro. Definitely. Now. PS2. I mean, they're still doing PS2 remakes, so I'll give that like one more console. They're still doing some remakes.
I think the last PS2 game was made in 2008.
Yeah,
I think it was,
to be fair, FIFA gets put on everything forever because, well, I mean, there's also things too to think about, like, for example, in like different countries where straight, like, they don't have access to PS3 or PS4. You know what I mean? Like, they continue to make shit forever for the old consoles.
I think the PS2 had the longest run, of games made for it, and therefore the largest library of them all. I think it had I want to say 15-year lifespan or something like that. I want to say,
yeah, they were
something pretty
games for that.
Substantial.
But at the end, it was definitely FIFA and Madden, but I mean more FIFA because it was just like worldwide. But yeah, like FIFA was still being made. Just like when you get blown away to think about Just Dance 2019 is going to be coming out on Wii. Which is like, what the fuck? Like, original Wii, it's coming out on. So, again, they're catering to the market. People still have a Wii. They still like Just Dance. And guess what? Just Dance 2019 is the same shit as 2018, 17, 16, 15. It's just different songs. So you can put that shit on Wii. Who cares? And again, they make enough. They sell enough of it to still make it. So good for them. I mean, that's the same thing. Like, you notice that like the last games that are always made for a console are usually sports games or like major franchises. Like that's always what it is. So, yeah, I remember though, like FIFA, I want to say 2009 or something was still being made for PS2, which is like fucking crazy to think about.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the last couple of games that were made for the PS2, I think one was a Final Fantasy game called Seekers of Adeline. I can't remember what it was about or what kind of game it was, whether it was a tactics RPG or something. I have no idea. Or I've just never seen it. I've never really looked it up either. It's just a Final Fantasy game I've never really heard of. It might have been a Japan exclusive. I don't know. But I can't remember ever seeing it or ever seeing anyone talk about it. I guess it was just forgettable, like Crystal Chronicles, you know.
Yeah. I just looked it up real fast. PES 2014. Pro Evolution Soccer 2014. That shit was 4 years ago.
Oh my god! I thought, wow, they must have made it. Really?
Oh
wow.
My God.
Okay. I thought it was like 2008. Wow.
That's insane.
That's insane.
It says on here, playing the last PS2 game ever made. It's an article on VentureBeat, and it's straight PES 2014. Holy shit! That was 4 years. Dude, the PlayStation 4 was out. Like, wow. Good for them.
That's insane.
Again, like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's usually like catering to those markets where, like, it's just, you know, it's either really expensive or just there's so many PS2s still in stock that, like, it's still lucrative for them to make a game. And again, like, soccer being so big worldwide, like, it makes sense. So I wish I could have seen that. Dude, if I would have saw that shit in, like, a normal store, like, I would have freaked out. I've been like, oh, why is there a PS2 game right there? Like, why is it 2014 there? That's insane.
This is a joke, right?
This is a joke.
Someone paying a prank on me.
Somebody right? Printed up that sleeve and put it on a Blu-ray case, right? What the fuck are we talking about right now? Are we talking about PS2 shit? That's crazy. So, yeah, no, everybody gets that point, though, where it's the dreaded thing, right? You get a job. You have all this money to buy games, especially when you live with your parents still. Because, yeah, your parents want to charge you, but they don't want to be a dick, and they're going to charge you just basic stuff. Because they want you to start to have some sort of responsibility, but they also don't want to break you either.
Definitely.
So they're trying to teach you, which is what parents are supposed to do. Good job. Yeah. But then you get out in the real world, and you're like, wow, shit is different. Like, I have a lot of bills.
I took a very ill-advised leap into the real world, and at the time I was kind of... Well, I was part-time as well, and I didn't really thought too far ahead. And, of course, then I had to get out of this house, basically. And, well, I won't go into detail, but basically my landlord fell out with my friend, and he had something to do with his daughter, so I'm not going to go there.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah, I couldn't live there. I couldn't afford it on my own, basically, so I had to go somewhere. And so, really, I was just working part-time and trying to keep my head above water, so games were out of the question. Well, new games anyway. And,
but again, you had amassed like a collection of stuff that you could just go back and play. I mean, there's still people that are like that. There's still people that'll turn on, a Wii or their Genesis, and now, of course, the NES Classic and SNES Classic have kind of made that like an easy thing to just pick up and, let's just have that in the house in case we want to play Mario or Mario Kart or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of become the thing now.
Yeah, and I think and ever since then, because I had to only buy these cheap games, if you like, I would call them cheap games. Like I said, back then they were £2, £3 a piece. And really, I think Super NES games and Mega Drive games weren't really that easy to find.
Sure.
They were kind of like a forgotten generation, I would say.
Right.
So PS1 was still quite a thing. PS2 was doing well. So I was buying like not brand new PS2 games. Then of course, because the PS2 is backwards compatible, I'd be buying like them PS1 games, and I'd just be I'll sort of stay about there. But luckily, the PS2, has a huge library, and so does the PS1. Combined, I think it's something like 300. No, I'm thinking of units sold. I think it's something like nearly 10,000 games, I think, between them or something like that.
Ridiculous number. Like, it's ridiculous.
10, 12,000, somewhere around there, if you combine them. So I had this almost virtually limitless. I mean, I couldn't possibly acquire all those games. So yeah, I just kept buying those. And then, of course, when the PS3 came out, and I kept keep stuck with my PS2. Then the PS2 broke. In fact, the PS2, I had 3. In fact, I eventually ended up with 3. I remember going to get a black one, then a silver one, then a black one, and then I kind of just reverted back to my PS1. And that's kind of where I remained ever since. And then because I kind of stuck around with these classic games, I became more interested in them under the hood. I started looking into the makers of the games and the companies that made them and the consoles themselves and the level designers and artists involved, and that led me then to look at other games. And then, of course, I kept going back and back and back, and then I started reading about Atari and ColecoVision and Intellivision and Magnavox and all that history, and it fascinated me. So then I started wanted to own all these things.
Right.
Then I ended up getting a job eventually, getting full-time employed, being more sensible, being a grown up, basically. Then
growing up, being mature, right?
Yeah, exactly. Paying bills and all that stuff, and then of course, I had the money to buy a PS3 back then. And now I have the money to buy a PS4. But because I've developed now over that time, I've kind of just sort of become invested in the history of video games. That's what I'm about now. So I'd rather spend, because right now I could spend I don't know what, £400 on a PS4. I'm not sure how much they are now. Maybe even £300. I don't know. And a good couple of games, perhaps, maybe secondhand, maybe brand new. I don't know. But when it comes to retro games, I could even go out there and buy one game for £400.
I was gonna say you could easily spend an entire. Yeah, you could buy you could spend it just the same as a PlayStation or a single game, depending on the game.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like Earthbound in the States is a particular example. In the UK, it's not so valuable, I don't think. But I think the North American copy, or if you sold it in America, it can go for upwards towards $1,000.
Right.
I think
it's still really
absurd money, game. Really. Considering it's not that rare a game,
right?
It's bizarre. It's one of those anomalies. Somehow it's become desirable but ridiculously pricey. And there's many other games out there that are equally desirable.
Sure.
Final Fantasy VII is probably a good example, but that doesn't go for much. $30, I'd say.
Yeah, I think like some of those games lose their value. Some of them lose their value when they become available to play otherwise. Like that's the problem. Like for a while there, Final Fantasy VII, the only way you could play it was to get a PlayStation, and then all of a sudden. Remake, not remake, but like I would say remaster or like PC version came out on PlayStation 4. Then they came out on PC itself, and like I think once it becomes more available to be able to play by other people, like legal means, you know what I mean? Like most people don't know about ROMs or what all that shit, but like just being able to buy it on PlayStation 4, like the allure of like, oh shit, that's Final Fantasy 7, like. I'm not saying it goes away, but also it could diminish how much the resale value is when you can easily just buy it on PlayStation 4 for $10 and play the game if you want.
Yeah, I think if you go back far enough, I think games like Final 7, 8, 9, and more likely 6 as well would generally the PS1 era of Final Fantasy games would fetch a decent penny. But I think you're right now that they're so. The sales, the number of times they've swapped hands has dropped because people can buy it online or download it, whether legally or otherwise.
Even legally. If you could buy Final Fantasy 7 on a Steam sale for like $8, like who's going to want to give a shit to pay $70 or $80 for the actual physical disc? Yeah, again, there is a market for it, but like for the person who wants to just play the game and don't care about the actual collecting side of things, they can just buy it on Steam and go that route if they want to. So I think certain games that happens, but of course there's still that like, no, I have the disc, and you get those people that collect, like you, that like are into the history of games and like into the physical media and into it being a tangible thing instead of just a icon on their desktop. You know what I mean? Like there are people that like that still. So I guess it just depends on the game because some games still hold their value regardless if they have like they're available on other consoles. It doesn't matter; they still hold their value well.
And that's you've touched on something there with physical media, and that's another reason why I tend to gravitate towards the classics, is because obviously they're physical for almost entirely. So modern games seems to be drifting towards the downloadable or even streamed format now. So I'm kind of not fearful, but I'm kind of sad about that because another reason why I collect video games, especially complete video games, is to look at the artwork and the booklet and the disc or cartridge or cassette in the case of the Amstrad. So having the complete package in decent condition. I'm not too hard on the condition as long as it's complete and it has what it came with originally and it looks decent. I'm on the market to buy it. So and I think when you get to like I don't know. I think when you get to I think they cared more about it back then. Earthbound's a particular example of that because Earthbound came with all sorts of stuff. It came with scratch and sniff cards,
right?
And if you have a copy of that, I can't remember what they smelled of, but it was a dumb kind of game, so it could have smelled of anything. Because your enemies were like dogs and stuff like that. So who knows what it could have smelled like, right? You could have smelled a wet dog, or something like that. I can't remember what they smelled like exactly. But yeah, it had all these things, and some of them had like maps and posters, and I bought myself a boxed Mega Drive, and I was particularly happy to see that it had its original guarantee card and a voucher that's awesome. Expired for.
Voucher you think it expired? You think you can call Nintendo Sega up? Yeah, hey Sega, this shit broke. You want to fix it? You'll be like, that's like 20 years past the warranty. I'm sorry. Like, there's no way we can fix that. I love the Nintendo line is the same, though. The Nintendo phone line in America has been the same forever. And you can still call that same Nintendo line that's on an NES, and it will get you to Nintendo, which is insane.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like, it's the same number. Like, the same number that they have on a sticker on the old NES, it is the exact same number still. So you can contact them and, obviously they won't fix your Nintendo, your NES, but you can still call them, and that is Nintendo's still their number to help fix things. So, yep.
Well, have you tried calling it?
I haven't tried calling it in a while, no. I know some people had to when the whole Fortnite thing happened. They called Nintendo asking why their shit wasn't working, but that's more Epic, not them. But yeah, I mean, like, I haven't called it in a while, but no, I just remember everybody saying, like, just to be clear, that number still works. I'm like, holy shit, that number's 30 years old. That's kind of crazy that it still works, but yeah, I mean, again, you get a good phone number, I guess, you got to hang on to it, right? I don't know. I've never worried about that.
That's all. I mean, because obviously we are very much well within the internet age. So if I got a problem, I'm not going to think of a phone number for it.
Correct. Yeah, we have the internet.
I'm gonna Google that shit.
Exactly.
I'm not gonna
just Google shit now. We don't call phone numbers and everything. There are still people out there that will still call phone numbers, but yeah, I don't do that. I will do online chat and email as often as I possibly can. So, But then again, thanks to the internet. So.
The less human contact, the better.
Yeah, exactly, right? Amazon is getting to a point where I don't have to leave my house for any reason at all, so keep that up, Amazon. And what's sad, though, is, again, for gaming, that's also true. Like, I can just buy games. Like, I can just download games. I don't have to leave the house for it, so.
And have it on 3 different platforms.
Yay! That's always the best thing. So, well, if people wanted to check you out and check out the things you do now, where would they go for all that?
Well, currently I write for a website called cultureofgaming.com, and as you may have guessed, I particularly focus on the retro stuff there. So if you jump on to cultureofgaming.com, I've been offline for a little while, so I haven't contributed much of late. But if you type in just David White into the search bar, you'll find most of the stuff I've written, or all the stuff that I've written, and I will get back to contributing actual written stuff to that side. Right now, I'm working on a podcast, a retro video game history podcast with Culture of Gaming called Retro Rumble, and that's that. And you can follow myself at Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter all that much. It's at Davey Shiro, which is DAVEYSHIRO. And the same on Instagram, where I post most of my retro video game collecting stuff. I've had to restart my Instagram because I couldn't remember the name of my last one, so it's kind of fresh. There's not much on there right now, but that's where I generally tend to share most of my stuff. And you can see that boxed Mega Drive that I recently got on there as well. That was something I posted recently, and so. Join the Facebook page for Retro Rumble as well. Just jump onto Facebook Retro Rumble, search for Retro Rumble, and it's actually, I'm just suddenly realizing it's actually a bit of a tongue twister, but quite hard. And on there, then that would be the best way to keep track of what I've been working on lately. And we just recently recorded our first episode, really our second attempt at our first episode, which didn't quite go quite so well. The sound was a bit off. I sound a lot quieter in certain parts, so we're working on that. That will eventually be on Culture of Gaming's YouTube, which I'll be working on almost immediately after this, in fact. So yeah, it goes up on Twitch every Sunday live. So I'll be working on episode 2 tomorrow, and that's a good way to follow me, really, because I'll be fully invested in that in the coming months or years or whatever.
And I'll have links to everything there, so if people want to check it out, they can just go to there and check out the links there. So, dude, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for telling me about so many things I had no idea about. Like, because that's exactly the reason why I wanted people on the show. So I appreciate you sharing all your stories, man. All right, and again, thank you, David, for being on the show. Again, if you just want to check out any of the stuff he does, he is all over the place. He is on Twitter at Davey Shiro, DAVEYSHIRO. You could also check him out on Instagram there. I'm going to have links in the show notes for everything. He has a lot of stuff to promote. He also has his podcast, Retro Rumble, as well as he's part of the Culture of Gaming network. So you can go on the website, cultureofgaming.com. Feel free to read up on the articles that he's written on all the retro stuff. If you guys want to be on the show just like he was, go ahead and send me a tweet at MitchPower1116 on Twitter, or at the podcast Twitter page, which is at GUG Podcast on Twitter. We also have a Facebook group, so you can just go to Facebook, search up Growing Up Gaming. You'll find that there. As well as we do have a YouTube channel, which right now at this time is mostly just episodes of the show with the logo just playing. So if you want to listen to on YouTube, you can definitely do that. Again, I hope to do more in the future with that. Maybe streaming some games there, some of the retro games people talk about here. So if you guys have any feedback, criticisms, anything, leave me a review. Let me personally know. The more I know about the show, the more I can make it better. So again, thank you guys so much for returning each and every week. I appreciate it, and I will catch you guys next week with another new episode. See ya.